I've been living with them for 22 years. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed, heavy, final, right in the center of the wedding ceremony. The music stopped mid-note. Conversations snapped shut. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, as if the world itself needed a second to process what had just been said. Now imagine this. Your daughter is standing in her wedding dress, seconds away from saying her vows. And her father steps forward and calmly admits he's been living a completely different life. What would you do? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. At the front row, I didn't move. My name is Ilaris Venn, 67 years old. I've spent most of my life being described the same way: composed, patient, difficult to read. And in that moment, while everyone else was unraveling, I simply sat there, with my hands folded over a small velvet bag resting in my lap. Because unlike everyone else, I wasn't surprised. Gasps rippled through the guests as people turned to look at him. Corvin Hale, my husband of 41 years. But he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a woman no one recognized. Mid-50s, still, watching everything with a strange kind of quiet expectation. And next to her, a young man, about 21, tall, familiar in a way that made people uncomfortable before they even understood why. Then it clicked. He had Corvin's eyes. My daughter, Lyrian, 32, stood frozen at the altar. Her bouquet trembled slightly in her hands as she stared at her father like she was trying to wake up from something that didn't make sense. "Is this a joke?" someone whispered. But Corvin didn't smile. Instead, he stepped forward again, as if this moment had been rehearsed in his mind for years. "This is my family," he said, gesturing to them. "I won't hide it anymore." Not anymore. The words hung there, heavy, calculated. And still, I didn't react. No anger, no shock, no collapse, just a quiet, measured breath. And then I smiled. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my bag. My fingers closed around something cold, solid, metal. A key. You're probably wondering the same thing everyone else was in that moment. Why would a woman smile when her entire life is being exposed in front of hundreds of people? The answer is simple. Because this wasn't the moment everything fell apart. This was the moment everything finally clicked into place. And as I stood up, holding that key in my hand, I realized he had no idea what he had just started. What kind of woman sits through a confession like that and doesn't break? That's the question hanging in the air as I slowly rose to my feet, every eye in that garden shifting from Corvin to me. But to understand that moment, really understand it, you have to go back. 41 years of marriage doesn't collapse in a single sentence. It erodes, quietly, gradually, almost politely. Corvin and I built a life people admired. A large home, stable finances, social circles that never overlapped too much, but enough to look complete. We hosted dinners, attended events, played our roles flawlessly. From the outside, it looked seamless. But inside, there were gaps. Small ones at first. Corvin travelled often. Business, he said. Always the same tone, always the same calm explanations. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious enough to confront. That's the thing about deception done well. It doesn't scream, it whispers. About 22 years ago, something shifted. Not dramatically, subtly. A second phone that appeared once, then vanished. Receipts that didn't match his trips. Accounts that moved money in patterns too precise to be accidental. Did I accuse him? No. And that's the part most people don't understand. I didn't ignore it. I observed. Because confrontation gives answers, but patience gives truth. So I started paying attention differently. Quietly, I gathered pieces. Names, dates, places. I didn't chase him. I let him move freely. Let him believe his life was perfectly divided. And in doing that, I saw everything. The woman, Malis. I knew her name within months. The child, Rethan. I knew about him before his first birthday. And still, I said nothing. Why? Because timing matters more than discovery. Because some truths, when revealed too early, don't collapse anything, they just scatter it. And I wasn't interested in fragments. I was interested in the whole structure. Back in the present, the murmurs around us grew louder. Guests leaned into each other, whispering, speculating, judging. At the altar, Lyrian finally found her voice. "Dad," she said, barely steady, "tell me this isn't real." But Corvin didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, just like that. No pause, no regret, just confirmation. And in that exact moment, something in her expression changed, not into anger, but into something emptier, like a door quietly closing. Corvin exhaled, almost relieved, like a man who believed he had finally taken control of his own story. That was his mistake. Because as I took my first step forward, I wasn't reacting to his truth. I was preparing to reveal mine. And my smile? It wasn't forgiveness. It was timing. Have you ever seen someone destroy their own life and not realize it yet? That was Corvin, standing there, shoulders squared, voice steady, like he had just freed himself instead of detonating everything around him. "This is my family," he repeated, gesturing towards Malis and Rethan. "I've supported them for years. I won't pretend anymore." You could feel the shift ripple through the crowd. Phones slowly lifting, whispers sharpening into judgment. The groom's family exchanging looks they couldn't quite hide. This wasn't just a private confession anymore. This was spectacle. And right at the center of it, my daughter. Lyrian turned to him, her voice quieter now, controlled. "How long?" A pause. Not hesitation, calculation. 22 years. You could almost hear the math happening in people's heads. 22 years. Overlapping timelines, double anniversaries, double lives. Lyrian blinked once, then again. "And you thought today was the right time to say this?" That question lingered, but Corvin didn't answer it. Because in his mind, this wasn't about timing. It was about control. "I'm done hiding," he said instead. "This is the truth." The truth. Interesting word. Because that's when I stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, drawing every eye in that space without raising my voice once. But I didn't look at him first. I looked at her, Malis. She held my gaze longer than I expected. Not defiant, not apologetic, just aware. like she had been waiting to see what kind of woman I actually was. Then I looked at the young man, Rethan. He shifted slightly under the weight of it, uncertainty flickering across his face. Because, unlike Corvin, he didn't look certain of anything. Good. Then, finally, I turned to my husband. 22 years, I repeated softly. That's a long time to maintain something hidden. Something in his expression changed, just for a second, a flicker. Because that wasn't the reaction he expected. No anger, no accusations, no collapse, just acknowledgement. And that's when the balance shifted. I reached into my bag, slowly enough that people leaned forward, quiet enough that you could hear fabric brushing against itself. Then I pulled it out. A small key, old, unremarkable at first glance, attached to a plain, worn tag. I held it between my fingers and extended it towards him. This is for you. A few people exchanged confused looks. Even Lyrian frowned slightly. But Corvin? He almost smiled. Like this was proof of something. Surrender, maybe. Acceptance. He took the key without hesitation, and then he saw the number engraved on it. Everything changed. His fingers tightened, then trembled, and just like that, the man who thought he controlled the moment realized he didn't even understand it. Why would a simple key make a man like that shake? Not hesitate, not question. Shake. You could see it spreading through him, starting in his fingers, tightening through his jaw, creeping into his posture like something cold had just wrapped around his spine. The confidence he walked in with? Gone. Just like that. What is this? He asked, his voice lower now, not commanding, not certain, careful. I let the silence stretch for a moment, because silence, when used correctly, says more than any explanation ever could. I believe, I said calmly, turning slightly so my voice carried across the entire gathering, that honesty deserves context. Now people leaned in, phones lifted higher, conversations stopped completely. Even the officiant stepped back. This was no longer a wedding. This was something else entirely. Near the back, a man stepped forward, quiet, unobtrusive, dressed like any other guest. But he wasn't. He carried a slim folder in his hands, and he walked directly toward me. Corvin noticed. Of course he did, because recognition hit him before I even spoke. Ilaris, he started, but the rest of the sentence never came. I took the folder and held it lightly, almost casually. 21 years ago, I said, I hired someone. A ripple moved through the crowd, not suspicion, confirmation. I didn't act on assumptions, I continued. I verified them. I opened the folder, but didn't hand it over. Not yet. Instead, I looked at him. I knew about Melis within 3 months. A sharp inhale from somewhere in the audience. I knew about Rethan before his first birthday. Now, the silence was heavier. Not shock anymore. Wait. Corvin's face had gone pale, not dramatically, but enough. Enough to show that something was slipping. You... what? He muttered. But I wasn't finished. I tracked everything, I said. Accounts, properties, transfers, patterns. Each word landed slower than the last, measured, intentional. You were very careful, I added softly. Just not careful enough. He took a step forward, then stopped himself. Because now he understood something crucial. This wasn't exposure. This was architecture. I don't understand, he said, but there was no strength behind it anymore. I finally nodded towards the key in his hand. That opens a safety deposit box, I said. One registered in your name. A pause, then controlled by me. That's when it hit him. Not fully, but enough. You've lived 2 lives, I continued, my voice steady, unwavering. I preserved both. Around us, people weren't whispering anymore. They were watching, waiting. Because whatever came next, it wasn't going to be small. He stared at the key like it had turned into something dangerous, then back at me. What did you do? He asked. And for the first time, there it was. Fear. I held his gaze, calm, certain. Nothing, I said quietly, that you didn't start. And in that moment, he realized the truth wasn't what he revealed today. It was what had been waiting for him all along. What was inside that box that could break a man faster than his own confession. The answer came out piece by piece, slow, precise, unavoidable. The safety deposit box wasn't symbolic. It was evidence. Everything Corvin thought he had hidden had been documented, organized, and preserved over 2 decades. Inside were full financial records, every transfer he made to support his second life. Properties purchased under layered arrangements, accounts he believed were invisible. They weren't. Alaris had tracked all of it, legally, carefully. And then she had acted. Years earlier, without confrontation, she had begun restructuring their shared assets. Quiet filings, strategic transfers, legal protections built into agreements Corvin had signed without reading closely, trusting routine over detail. One document mattered most, a post-nuptial clause triggered by undisclosed financial activity and long-term deception, activated the moment he confirmed everything publicly, right there, at the wedding. Which meant this wasn't just exposure, it was execution. Corvin's access to major assets, frozen pending investigation. His undisclosed income streams, flagged automatically once the documentation was submitted. And the second household, the one he claimed as his real life, financially entangled in ways that now drew legal scrutiny. Maylee stood still, but her expression had changed. Not shock, calculation turning into realization. Because she understood what came next. Investigations, account reviews, questions that don't go away. Rethan looked between them, confused, then unsettled, as the foundation he grew up on shifted into something unstable. Not erased, but redefined. And Lyrian? She didn't cry. She stepped down from the altar slowly, her dress brushing against the ground, and stopped in front of me. You knew, she said. Not accusing, not emotional, just searching. Yes, I answered. No excuses, no long explanation, because none were needed anymore. Behind her, Corvin said nothing. For the first time in decades, he had no control over the narrative. In the weeks that followed, everything unfolded exactly as structured. Business ties dissolved quickly once the story spread. Social circles closed ranks, distance replacing familiarity. Legal reviews expanded into formal investigations. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just inevitable. And then, quiet. Days later, the house felt different. Not empty, just honest. Sunlight stretched across the floors as I sat near the window, hands resting still, no longer holding anything in place. No waiting, no watching, no silence left to maintain. Lyrian visited that afternoon. She didn't ask questions. She simply sat beside me, and for the first time in years, nothing was hidden between us. Everything that needed to happen had already been set in motion long before that wedding day. The truth didn't arrive when he spoke. It had been there all along, carefully stored, precisely timed, waiting for him to unlock it himself.